there, I'm Nikki and this is Pin Cut Sew. Today I have two stories to tell you. The first and the most useful to you is that I'm going to show you how to make this baby quilt. Also this baby quilt. They are the same quilt actually. It might not look like it, but they are. But the secondary story is that I am so bad at quilting math that I had all of this fabric left over. I managed to cut almost twice as many rectangles as I actually needed to. This is not the first time this has happened to me. I was making my mother-in-law a quilted table runner for Christmas, and I was making this table runner and I'm like, why do I have so much fabric? This table runner could span like 3 tables. So I ended up making my sister a table runner too, so it worked out fine. And now look, I can make a whole nother quilt. But I don't know how I go so wrong. Like look, I calculated all of this on my little scrap of paper and I thought I needed to cut so many rectangles, and it turns out I needed half that many rectangles. And I knew I was somehow doing it wrong. But I don't know why, I cannot wrap my brain around quilt math sometimes. So anyway, I thought about editing all of that stuff out and making it seem like I made this perfectly the first time. But who am I to say that there are no mistakes in quilting? So I kept it in, and to redeem myself, I made you this free printable. All of the information on here is correct. This is the correct number of squares and rectangles that you need to make. So you can go get this on my website. I'm gonna post a link to it. It is in my shop for $0. And then after I finish this quilt, I'm going to put this quilt and this quilt in my Etsy shop. I'm gonna put that in the very first part of the description below. So if you want one of these quilts, don't wait too long to buy one, because the last few times I've done this, they sold really quickly. And then after they're sold, I will make sure and note that in the description. So let's get started, make this baby quilt. Okay, so I pulled a huge variety of fabrics for this. I had this collection of little fat quarters that one of my daughters had gifted me. And it had little woodland creatures and then this stripe and a few others, but I just then pulled fabrics from my stash that matched with those and started cutting. So I did some quilty math, and I need 270 rectangles total. So I'm cutting my rectangles 4.5 by 2.5. On this quilt, they were a little bit smaller because I was working with the Moda scrap bag and the strips had the selvage on one side, and so I couldn't quite get 2.5 inches, but I could get 2. And so for this one, what I did was I sewed 2 long strips together, and then I just cut them into 4-inch segments, and that worked perfectly too. But for this one, because it's such a good stash buster, I was just trying to clean out some fabrics from my stash, and all of these it was kismet. They all just matched together so well. So I just started cutting, and since I had more or less of some fabrics, like out of a fat quarter, I could get 24, but I only had a strip of this, so there's only 4. So I'm trying to keep track so I don't have to recount all my rectangles over and over of how many I managed to cut, so that in the end, I will have 270. If you are going to make it so that you have the solid blocks in between, then you need to half how many blocks you need and then do the others of these. So obviously I would need half as many if I were going to make solid blocks in between, but that kind of quilty math you might have to do yourself, because I'm not great at it, and I might have gotten all these numbers wrong, and if by the time I'm done with this tutorial and I have made a quilt top that was not the size I meant to, I'll have to come back and correct the numbers. So basically, like, this one's already cut, I think 2.5 inches. Oh, not quite. So with whatever fabric I have to work with, I'm just making the strips 2.5 by 4.5. So there's 2, 4. I keep these pieces. I put them in my scrap box. Let's see what I can get out of this piece. Ooh, I have a new rotary blade, and it is nice. It's the best feeling. Make the edge straight. If you're new to rotary cutting, I do have a video on this. It's one of my older videos, so I will link it up there in the corner. How to cut for quilts with a rotary cutter and mat. Put that in my scraps. Okay, let's see. So I got 217 out of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of my fabrics, and then I'll add everything up, and if I don't have enough, I will find some more fabrics to work with, and if I have way too many, then I will put some aside for another project. 2, 4, 21. Okay, I did it. All my fabrics are cut. So now I'm just going to get a big bowl. Okay, this is what I really like to do for scrap quilts like this. When I want to make sure that it's truly super random, move my sticky notes. Okay, so I really just like to separate them so they're not all stuck together and put them into a bowl. I'm not gonna put that whole pile in. And I stir it as I go. Seems silly, but this way I don't have to think while I'm chain piecing pieces together. I don't have to think about what's going with what. Am I putting all the same fabrics with the same other fabrics, etc. So this is how I do it. It works really well for me. Okay, I'm just gonna dump this out. Make sure they're good and mixed up and jumbled together. Okay, now I'll take them over to the sewing machine and start chain piecing. Alrighty, I have my bowl here with all my scraps, and all I'm gonna do, have my 1/4 inch foot attached to my sewing machine. I'm gonna pair them up and start chain piecing. Finish one and grab 2 more. And keep going. I'm not gonna do the whole bowl at once because that will be overwhelming when I get to the ironing stage. So I'll just see how far I get in the first batch. And once I have several attached, you can do a lot more than this, but just for the sake of showing you, I just snip them apart. And when I press them, it doesn't matter which direction because the way I'm going to put the quilt together, the seams don't need nested or anything. So I'm just going to press them probably towards the darker fabric. And then I'll just keep on going until all my little squares are made. Okay, remember how I said if my math is way off, I'll come back and tell you? Well, my math was embarrassingly way off. I cut almost twice as many rectangles as I really needed. I don't know what my problem is with quilty math. I always get it wrong. So anyway, I started, look how many I have left. It would have made more sense if I had actually cut twice as many, but it wasn't twice as many. It was less than twice as many. So I don't know what the heck I was doing. What you actually need is only, if the grid is 8 by 10 of these half square blocks, this 8 across, 10 down, you only need 80 of these. So that means 160 little rectangles, not 270. So either I'll make a second baby quilt or make something else with those later, but I'm gonna carry on with the much more manageable 80 blocks that I made. Don't worry, the quilt guide that I made to go with this is correct. Okay, so what I have now is 80 of these half square blocks, and I'm gonna set them up in rows of 8. So I'll have 10 rows of 8 so that my baby quilt will end up being the correct size for a baby quilt. So I'm not going to be too strategic other than just making sure I don't have 2 of the same fabric next to each other and that I am shifting the direction of the blocks so that one is vertical and the next one is horizontal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm out of room on my table, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up the first 5 rows. Well, I'm going to do the first 4 and then I'll move this one up. So what I like to do is find some sticky notes and I'll write my row numbers 1 through 10. Okay, and then I can just put the number 1 on the first block of my first row. So here's my first row. I'm actually going to put a pin in it. This will help me keep track, and then I will just carefully compile my row into a pile. Then I'll put number 2 on the first one over here. Okay, I'm going to move row 5 up so that I can make sure I'm not putting fabrics next to each other that I don't want next to each other. And then I'll keep going. Okay, I have all 10 of my rows. These sticky notes are going to stay on until I am Done sewing all the rows together so that I don't get confused. Now I'm going to web piece these together. Let me show you what I mean. All right, let me just interrupt this project for just 1 second to tell you 2 things. The first is, if you like this video, please hit the like button below it because that helps it be shown to more people. Second of all, if you go get this freebie from my website, which I'm gonna link below, you have the opportunity to join my newsletter mailing list where I send you weekly-ish newsletters with sewing information and stuff you might have missed or whatever, but especially right now because I've been working on a secret project. It's an ebook. It's about making money with sewing in a really out-of-the-box way, and in my opinion and experience, it is the fastest way to make money at sewing. It is not blogging or YouTubing, and it is not craft fairs. So if you are interested in reading about that, then if you're on my newsletter, you will receive a discount code for it. So that's why you want to be sure and be on the newsletter list right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my row 1, I'm going to lay the second block in row 1 on top of the first and a stitch. Then I'm not going to continue with row 1. I'm going to put that up here. I'm going to get row 2 and do the first 2 blocks in row 2 the same way. Chain piece. Move row 2 up next to row 1. Get row 3. Same thing until I have sewn the first 2 blocks of all 10 rows together. Okay, now I am not going to cut these apart like I would for chain piecing. I'm just going to bring them all the way back up here to the top. Row 1, I'm going to open it out, get my next block of row 1, and sew it on next. And then I'm going to get my next block of row 2, open out row 2, and sew that one on next. And keep going until I have all 10 rows sewn together and they're kind of all together in a web without being separated. Okay, it's helpful to leave the sticky notes on because in these first few rows things can get twisted, and I always know which side I need to be sewing the next block onto. Or if you need to put more sticky notes on the piles because the sticky note is gone from the pile now, I'm just trying to keep it straight in my head. I know where I placed each one, but it could also be helpful to label them if you need to. Okay, here's my web. Cool, right? So now I don't have to reorganize the rows or worry that I'm going to get them out of order because they're still attached and I'm not going to detach them. So we're going to press them. I'm going to press, this is another reason why I leave the numbers on. I'm going to press the odd numbers towards the right and the even numbers towards the left. Okay, so what I mean is I'm going to press the seams. Here with row 1, I'm going to press row 1 towards the sticky note. Not the ones I already pressed earlier, just the ones that I just sewed. And then I'm going to move down to row 2 and I'm going to press them away from the sticky note so that when I sew my rows together, they're going to nest nicely. Basically, it doesn't matter which way, just alternate directions with each row. So now I can simply start with row 1, flip it over onto row 2, and sew this seam with no pins because my seams are going to nest together perfectly because I press them opposite directions. And then I'll do the next one until all 10 are sewn together. Alright, here's my finished quilt top. I think it's so cute. I can't believe how well these scrap fabrics went together. This is definitely one of my favorite color combos I've ever made in a quilt. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this, and I'll show you when it's done, of course. And then you can also go ahead and go buy it from my Etsy shop if you want to. And make sure you go grab the printable version of this quilt. It's just a quick quilt guide so you can know how to make this without referring back to the video every time. And if you need instructions for finishing it, like making the quilt sandwich, I have a tutorial for that on my website that I'll link to, and I have a video for the binding tutorial also. So you can go watch that, and I'll put the link right here. Right here. I think it's up here. So yeah, cheers, and I will see y'all soon.